Hi, welcome to addictions class for the day, people. And more than just addictions, if you've noticed, there's lots of different topics in here. You might be, how come this is an addictions class, but we didn't really mention drugs or alcohol last time? Or it's an addictions class, but we're not talking about sex addiction or addiction to money or the lifestyle. Because the thing with addictions, remember, is that they're often initially an attempt to cope with a problem, right? So the problem might be feelings, big one, the F word, right? The problem might be feelings. An addiction helps me change my feelings. So often it becomes a coping mechanism for that. It's like it's an escape. It's a distraction. It's fun. It's, all these kinds of things. So addictions are generally, initially, an attempt to cope, just not in a way that ends up getting you what you want in the end. Because remember, addictive brain and healthy brain's job is to keep the organism alive. Addicted brain's job is to keep the addiction alive, even if it hurts or kills the organism. Since you're the organism, that's not so great, right? So most of these, if you realize, are going to be just like, wow, these are all kinds of skills and practices and information and things I need to live my life, right? So it's really living skills. It's really the ability to engage and live your life. So that's why we're going to talk about all different things. Now, 5 deep breaths. I only get to see you a couple days a week now. I mean, you come to substance abuse class and we do our 5 deep breaths, so now you get a couple days doing it again. I hope some of you, I will be asking, I hope some of you are doing the 5 deep breaths a lot more than that. Now wearing your cute little masks, from what I understand. And hey, nothing sexier than a man in a pink mask, right? I hear they got a lot of pink masks. So if you're a guy and you got a pink mask, I mean, own it, right? Just own it. So I have a really crappy homemade mask that I did like in 10 minutes way early on so I could go to the grocery store. And I have some camo masks that my husband did. So we've got some fun ones, but hopefully soon we'll be breathing the clean air again. So we like breathing though, in a mask, out of a mask. So 5 deep breaths, remember, slow and deep. Generally about a 7 count on the way in, hold for about 4, out to about 8. Just hold at the bottom till you need to take that next big breath. So nice breath in, hold at the top, and out. Really get it all out of there. It's easier to take a nice deep breath in and out. And as you're doing these, just imagine that all the tension releases as you release the breath. And in, and out. And anything you hear or see or smell during this time, just let it float by. Just don't latch onto it. In, and out. Do that thing called urge surfing, where just let any of those distractions float down the river. And last one, in, and out. Now today we're going to talk about, if you've taken the parenting classes, or I guess the parenting videos that I did with the sergeant over at headquarters, supposedly have been playing too. So that one of our foundational elements for parenting, and this is true even if you don't use the love and logic parenting that we kind of mold our program around, any kind of good parenting program, one of the foundational elements is this thing called empathy. And we're going to talk about empathy today, not just as a concept, but as a practice, meaning something that you can do, but it takes work. Because unless you are raised in a really empathetic environment, and most of us aren't. This is not what parenting has been seen as in our culture. If you've not been, kind of immersed in empathy, like it's in the ocean and you're immersed in it so it feels natural to you, you're actually going to have to learn the skill of empathy. But it's the foundation of good parenting, because empathy is actually what allows us to take care of children, right? It's what allows us to try to get into, kind of the little baby's diaper and figure out the world from their perspective. So empathy is an important skill because it builds that connection. And when you're building empathy, when you're learning how to empathize with other people, it also means you have to have these internal skills of self-compassion and self-care and noticing your own emotions. Because see, if you can't identify and deal with your own emotions and have compassion for your own emotions, you're not going to be able to do it for other people. So in order to have that skill and that connection, you're also going to have to learn how to deal with your own feelings. And remember, our feelings, right? Feelings give us meaning and motivation in life. We're meant to have feelings. In fact, we can't even make decisions without feelings. They have done things where, like a guy at a nursing home, he was in a nursing home because he could not take care of himself because he had such severe epileptic seizures. And seizures damage your brain, so that's why you don't want to have people having these continuous seizures. And they actually split. If you imagine your brain, and here's your brain stem here, right? And so this is the part that does breathing and respiration, heart rate. That's like, this. Here's your spine and your brain stem. And then this part's your limbic system. This is the emotions, and notice how it crosses here. And this upper part, your fingers here, as I'm showing, this is your cortex, your thinking brain, and this part of your fingers is actually your prefrontal cortex. And what's supposed to happen is your brain's supposed to be like this, where your emotions actually informs your whole brain. Notice it's in the middle, that midbrain. It communicates both with that deep part of your brain, that survival part of your brain, and the thinking part of your brain, that executive part behind I can't even say it, behind the forehead, your PFC. And when this is all intact, what happens is your emotions are good at giving information both ways. So something triggers you, you feel an emotion, then you think about it, you decide what to do about it because this part's helping you regulate it, right? But if you have had trauma go on, you haven't been taught empathy, this part of your hand is lifted up like this. So now what you've got is this really active limbic system, this emotional system, kind of going crazy in there, and there's nothing to kind of help it get through. So you've got to teach yourself the skills to engage this prefrontal cortex and get it in there kind of balancing everything. So you're using your survival skills. If you need to fight off a bear, you can fight off a bear. And you keep breathing and your heart keeps going and your blood keeps pumping and you have blood pressure and all that stuff. So you're keeping that part going. Your emotions are telling you, fight, flight, freeze, or flee when you need to, freeze or fawn when you need to. Boy, I can think of the fourth F, when you need to. So it's telling you all that, but it's informing this part, like some things have meaning, like, my kids, they have meaning to me. This is important to me. That's important to me. Really notice this. So those emotions are really right in the middle of our brain. And it forms this ring around there. Now here's the thing. What they do sometimes to deal with these epileptic seizures that won't stop is they would actually sever connections between parts of the brain, because your brain is an electrical system, and if you sever some of those connections, you don't have all this crazy electrical activity that causes a seizure. Well, when they separated his limbic system from his thinking part of his brain, the problem is now it's not connecting, and this guy could list the positives and negatives of something. He could list the pros and the cons, but he couldn't make a decision, because emotions give us that ability to put meaning and motivation with something and go, hey, here's the pros, here's the cons, here's where I really want to put my energy behind, here's what's important to me. So we need emotions to be informing what we're going to do. So when people say, like, leave the emotions out of it, I'm just going to do it on a thinking level, not true. We all have our emotions. The thing is, we can be conscious of them and aware of them. Awareness of emotions is important, and making our decisions based on that, or we can be unaware of our emotions, and then they're really going to affect us. And years ago, I used to go to this networking group, and there was, I was the only therapist there, and there was a guy, and he dealt with car lots. I mean, he was selling cars, and there was this whole group of people, a lot of business people, and he's saying, what's what's the number one reason people buy a car? And people were doing all these things. It's gas mileage, it's horsepower, it's the color, it's this or that. And I said, oh, it's their emotions. It's how the car makes them feel. And actually, a lot of the business people were really laughing at me, like, oh, look at the little therapist. And after a little while, he said, she's right. It's about the emotional attachment to that car. Now, some people go like, nope, I'm just making a decision. I've read all the consumer reports, but they see themselves. What's important to them is seeing themselves as a rational, logical person buying a car. So that still fills their emotional need to appear like someone who's done their research, right? So you say, yeah, it's an emotional thing. So we try to tune in as our car salesman, what's this person buying a car for? Is it to haul around their kids? So they're like, I want to feel like I have a safe vehicle. Is it they want to attract, people of the opposite or the same sex? I want one that says, ooh, I've got sex appeal. Is it, whatever the deal is with the cars. So it's that emotional thing. So we need our emotions to help inform us. And how we learn about emotions is first through empathy. How will our early caregivers empathize with us? So empathy is what lets us respond to the baby. The baby cries, and it's our empathy that says, wow, what's the baby feeling? What's the baby needing? What's the baby wanting? The good thing is with babies, it's pretty easy, right? There's a limited number of choices. But babies don't stay babies, right? They grow into very complex human beings. And now you can't just assume that, when someone's unhappy, they need food, right? Because there are a whole bunch of things. So it's pretty easy with babies, and most of us have some natural empathy toward babies. It gets harder as people get more complex because people will have their own perspective on the world. We've talked about, each of our reality. And empathy is what allows us to cross that bridge and connect that bridge between us and other people. Because I can never totally get into your reality. You can never totally get into my reality. Empathy builds the bridge between our two realities. So it is the greatest tool of our compassion that we have. It starts early on. Even babies kind of empathize with other babies. If babies in the nursery are crying, other babies seem to get upset for them. So there's a primitive empathy kind of born in. Empathy shows a curiosity and interest in the other person's experience. Not, well, here's how here's how I feel, here's how you should feel, here's, how it is. It's, I'm interested in what they're feeling. Curiosity and interest are highly correlated with something we call emotional intelligence, right? The ability to identify and manage my own feelings and the ability to identify and deal with other people's feelings. This is what makes a lot of people really successful. And that's why I said, I've used the example before that George W. Bush and Bill Clinton, very opposite in terms of intellectual capacity and political things or whatever, but what both of them had, although it looked different in the two people, was emotional intelligence. People liked being around them. People felt like they could relate to them, right? So they felt some connection. Both of them have some emotional intelligence. And it's also, empathy, curiosity, and interest are also highly correlated with the ability to be a good role model or leader. So, and creativity flourishes in those who tap into that curiosity and interest. So empathy is our greatest tool for this. So think about it like, okay, empathy is I'm curious about what's going on in there. And that also allows you to think like, say you got someone who's got some really great ideas. If you're curious about them, you can find out whole new worlds of things. So empathy is a skill set made up of 4 separate parts. Okay, so we're going to talk about them in order. I have handouts when I get back. You're going to have all kinds of handouts that I will be happy to give you. But a skill set. Skills can be learned, remember? Skill set made of 4 separate parts. 1, staying out of judgment. You got to lay judgment to the side. I'm not going to judge you. That's right, that's wrong, that's good, that's bad. You want to stay curious and interested. Curious and interested just says, what's it like to be in that person's body, mind, heart, soul, spirit, right? Curiosity and interest. So set aside judgment, remain in curiosity and interest. Means you're going to ask a few questions. You're really going to try to figure out what it's like to be them. 2, active perspective taking. So this ties into that. No judgment, curiosity and interest. Now I'm really going to try to see it and feel it from the other person's perspective. Whether or not I tend to feel that same perspective. That's why those of you men in the room who have daughters, you can still empathize with your daughters even though you've never been a girl. I mean, we're not even going to talk about the whole sex change thing down in Trinidad because that went away a while ago, right? But, you can empathize with your daughters because you are a whole human being and they're a whole human being and we have feelings. So even though you've never had the experience of being a girl, you can empathize because you're trying to see it and feel it from the other person's perspective. Same thing with moms and sons, right? You've never been a guy, you're going to be able to put yourself in their position. So staying out of judgment, active perspective taking, not just half-assed, right? You're going to actively try to get what it's like to be that person. Third step, identifying emotion in others, including verbal and nonverbal cues. Remember, anywhere from 90 to 97% of cues are considered nonverbal. So what does a person's face look like? Are they twitching? Are they sweating? And even these micro expressions that we don't even know we're registering, we can tell if someone's smiling or not smiling by their eyes, not just their mouth, right? You've seen that fake smile or whatever the deal is. And we've talked about it in class, teenagers love to do the, checking out their brains. That eye roll, universal sign of contempt. Across the world, different cultures, universal sign of contempt. The eye roll says, whatever, basically like, you are beneath me. So that's that thing. So you can identify emotions from watching them and hearing what they're saying. And then the fourth step, this is the hard one sometimes too. So now not only am I setting aside judgment, curious and interested and actively trying to get into their perspective, now, and I'm identifying what emotions I think they're having, I'm going to articulate, fourth step, articulate and say out loud an identified emotion that the other person is having. So this is where I might say, maybe my kid comes home from school, and if your kid comes home from school, some kids, they'll walk in the door and your kid says, you're like, oh my gosh, our teacher told us today we have to do a speech in front of the class, right? And if you're reading that kid, you're setting aside judgment, you're not basing it on what you would feel, you're really looking at the kid, you'd be like, oh my God, this kid is scared to death. This kid really doesn't want to do a speech. This kid is nervous, right? So you would be taking all that in and then you would actually say, oh, wow, right? That sounds really kind of scary. You look pretty anxious. Or as one little kid I worked with said, nerve whacking. Something was nerve whacking. He had a little speech impediment. So identifying the emotion in the other person. So really trying to see it. Now, you might be a person who loves public speaking. So see, if you weren't being empathetic, if you were just being in your reality and thought, well, my reality is the reality, right? You'd be like, a speech? You get to make a speech? Oh my God, speeches are so much fun, right? The kid looks like they're up against a firing squad and you're saying how fun it is. That's because you're seeing it from your perspective and you're not trying to step into their shoes. So the same event, doing a speech, might affect one kid one way, scared to death. Your other kid might walk in the door and say, oh my God, you're not going to believe it, speech. And if I'm good enough in the class, I get to do it in front of the whole school, right? With that kid, and you might be scared of speeches, but with that kid, you're going to be like, really? The whole school? That's exciting, right? You're going to go with their feeling on it when you're being empathy. And you can ask some questions about it, like how many people, how long's the speech, what are you going to talk about, right? All those things. So that's that entering into another person's perspective, building that bridge of empathy. And that's when we talk about the difference sometimes when people say, well, what's the difference between sympathy and empathy? They kind of come from the same thing. They sound a lot. Sympathy often slams the door. Empathy opens the door. Empathy says, I'm trying to build this bridge. Sympathy often slams the door by kind of saying, oh, you poor thing. I feel so bad for you. Slam the door. I know you'll get through it, right? Sympathy is often an attempt to say, wow, that is terrible. And there's part of you that says, I'm glad it's not happening to me. And so now I'm going to close things down. I'm not going to be curious. I'm not going to ask questions because I don't want to go there. And when we're having empathy, we're trying to build bonds with people. We're saying, I will walk by you through all this stuff. And sometimes it'll be fun, and sometimes it won't be fun, but I'm here. I'm walking by you through this stuff. So, empathy is trying to get what the experience is like for the other person. It involves listening with the goal of understanding and connecting. Okay? Doesn't mean you have, like I said, like with the speech thing, you don't have to agree that giving speeches is great or horrible. It's just getting their perspective on it. And you're not going to argue, defend, react, attack, right? So you're not going to try to convince the kid who's petrified about it that this is like going to be the greatest thing on earth. Now you might try to help them, like, how are you going to deal with anxiety? What do you think would help you get through it? How can we make this as easy as possible? After, remember, don't rush to fix things. After you've really dealt with what's the experience like for them. So that's what it keeps us in their perspective of the experience, not ours. Now, so my example here, and this is from the sheet that I'll give you in class too. If someone tells you about something they're hurting about. So, empathetic success. If you're mirroring with empathy, you'd say something like, wow, that sounds really painful. They've told you something they're hurting about. That sounds really painful. Tell me what that's like for you. Can you tell me a little bit what that's like for you? Right? And then you demonstrate, here's the hard part, it's a skill, remember? Demonstrate with your posture, your utterances, your voice tone, that you're right there with them while you experience this. You don't like get that zoned out look in your head or in your eyes, like, you're zoning out. You don't look like you're forming a counter argument. Well, that's just stupid, don't do that. Or you don't look around the room, or you guys can't check your phone, but you don't check your phone. You don't pick up the TV remote. You don't, all those kinds of things. You really show them with your posture, with your body language, with your voice tone, etc. I'm really trying to get what this is going on for you, okay? So that says, I'm right here while you're experiencing this. Think about a time with grief. When someone's going through grief, this is often hard to do. People often say, oh, well, they're in a better place now. Or, when God closes the door, they open a window. Or, all these kinds of things, which is kind of like, let me get out of Dodge real quick. It's to try to kind of shut the conversation down instead of saying, what's that like for you? Oh, man. And just being with them through that. Okay? Now, empathetic fail number 1, which I call flat mirroring or parroting, you are saying back what they're saying, but you're not doing anything that shows you're interested or you want more. There's no curiosity and interest. So you might say, well, yeah, you're hurting because your mom died. You don't ask them any other further questions. How old was your mom? Was she sick for long? Were you close to your mom? What are you struggling with most? But you're not showing them you're not showing any interest. You're not showing follow-up questions. You're not showing body language. You're just saying, wow, your mom died. Yeah, that's sad. Right? That's a flat mirror. That's a parroting. But that really doesn't communicate that you're building that bridge. Now, empathetic fail number 2, false reassurance or closing the conversation down. Okay? And that's one of those things that we do often because we're feeling comfortable. So someone tells you about, their mom dying or whatever, and you're just like, oh, yeah, that's too bad. Well, you are such a strong person. You always do really well with these things. I know you get through it, right? Or, oh, everything will work out. Here's one, and here's one that often people get like, oh, okay, I get that. Say you come back from court, and court did not go the way you wanted. And you come back and you're saying to yourself, like, you won't believe this. I mean, I go in the courtroom and there's all these people and they have really similar charges to mine and they get easy. Their deals are all really good and I get up there and that judge threw the book at me, right? And an empathetic fail would be, someone saying like, oh yeah, judge kind of threw the book at you. You would probably feel like that's all you have to say. I mean, this is emotional, right? Or they try to fix it like, well, maybe you shouldn't have done that, or, oh, I'm sure you'll get through it, or, oh, it's not that bad. And most of us, when we have an empathetic failure on the other end, you feel it, and you often get kind of mad about it, right? Like, what do you mean I'll get through it? I always get through it. Did you not hear what I just said, right? The empathy, and it doesn't mean they have to fix it, because rushing in to fix is another way of shutting down someone else's feelings. Like, oh crap, I don't want to handle feelings. Well, you should talk to your lawyer, and maybe, if you talk to your lawyer, tell them this, and tell them that, and tell them that. You want to go into that. So all of those were ways of getting away from the feelings, rather than really having the ability. And once you've sat with someone through the feelings, you've been curious, you've asked questions, you've noticed their reactions to that, they've said, whatever, you're sitting with them, you're walking with them, you're going through this with them, then if they want help solving something, you can ask, like, you want to kick around some ideas? Or, and sometimes people say, like, no, you know what? It just helps to have you listen. And if that's the case, as this one woman I know from New Zealand would say, good on you, right? Then that's done. Other times you can then go into some kind of brainstorming, problem solving, what's going to happen. But don't rush to get into that state. Really show, like, hey, I'm going to build this bridge of connections. So, 4 steps again, I'm going to review before we stop this one. 1, staying out of judgment. And you do that by being curious and interested. And show that you're curious and interested with your posture, your voice tone, your follow-up question, really try to put yourself there, because the second step is active perspective taking. And remember, your experience of something is based on your perspective, like what you've been through, and your perspective is based on your experience. If you've experienced certain things before, you're probably going to have a different perspective on that. Kind of the little kids we talked about in the parenting videos, little kids in a hailstorm, their perspective is that it's pretty tragic because they haven't had a lot of life experience. If you've been through some hailstorms, your perspective is a little different. That's part of why this pandemic is so hard, because we don't have the perspective. We're all kind of in this, this is a whole new thing, because we don't have this experience. Thank God we don't go through a lot of these, right? But 1918, I guess there's a few people still alive who went through the Spanish influenza, but most of us don't have an experience of a pandemic that spreads quickly and involves so much of a thing. So for a lot of people, this is really challenging their coping skills. And that's why kids really have parents, because parents are supposed to have more experiences, more skills to put some perspective. So first step, stay out of judgment. Second step, active perspective taking. And this helps you build new experiences as well. 3, identifying an emotion in the other person. And this means you're going to have to contain your own emotions. That internal boundary is going to have to say, this is not about me. I got to hold that stuff in right now because I'm attending to them. Now, if you're the person being attended to, that's different. Hopefully you have someone empathizing with you. But in this one, it's like, I'm not going to let my emotions get in the way and take over the conversation, hijack the conversation. So identifying the emotion in others through what they're saying, what their actions are, expressions, etc. And finally, articulating and saying out loud that identified emotion that the other person's having. So really walking with them through it. So the word of the day is empathy. Do a little bit of practicing maybe. Now, it's hard when I say practice in here, because people are like, I don't want to empathize with anyone in a uniform. I don't want to empathize with my cellie. I don't want to. But again, are there situations where you could use empathy in here, where you could really listen to someone from that place of non-judgment? And you can do that. Are there places, say you're in here and you're writing letters to your kids. Can you empathize instead of jumping in to solve? Here's a biggie. Anyone still getting phone calls or video visits? Are these full of, have you called my lawyer? Have you done this? Have you done that? Are they full of logistics? Or are you taking some time to really empathize with the people in your life? So maybe this is your child who's missing you. Are you empathizing with their experience? This is a hard one, because sometimes you're like, but I'm in jail, right? And you want people to empathize with you and how hard it is for you. What if you empathized with your family member? What if you empathized with your spouse, and said, wow, what's it like being out there doing this pandemic thing? Or even when there's not a pandemic, what's it like being out there without me, right? Try to put yourself in their shoes. What is it like suddenly having no second parent with the kids? Or if you're separated from the person where, they're having to explain to the kids what's going on. What's all that like for them? And quite honestly, when you think about it, sometimes our culture loves to say, hey, what's in it for me, right? Why should I empathize? What's in it for me? Well, what's in it for you is what you're meant to do, which is relate to other people. This really is what builds those bonds of relationship. So what's in it for you? Hey, how about a better relationship? with your spouse, with your kids, with your coworkers, with your friends, with your neighbors, you know, who knows, maybe even the family dog. Dogs don't seem to have a lot of empathy on their own, but, you know, you get better relationships. So that's what that empathy builds. And when you're doing that empathy, the other thing is as you start to practice this, people go, well, empathy really involves the other person, but maybe I could have self-empathy, and you can call it self-empathy, you can call it self-compassion. Practice on yourself as well. What if, when I'm having a feeling, instead of saying in my head, that's stupid, or trying to instantly change it through a distraction or an addiction or whatever, you did these steps on yourself. Okay, let's see. I'm having this feeling. Well, instead of judging it, oh, that's just stupid, I'm just going to get curious and interested. Where do I feel this feeling in my body? What does it feel like? What's the sensation? Hot, cold, loose, tight, numb, tingly, sweaty, dry, what's the sensation? Get curious. What is this feeling? Is there anything else coming up, right? What do I start thinking when I have this feeling? Wow, I wonder where that came from. Did something trigger it? Do I notice something? So get curious, get interested. Then try to take your own perspective on that. Like, wow. And even if you think, you might say, let's go back to the grief one. You might say, but my mom died 3 years ago. Why am I still feeling sad sometimes? So without judgment, you're kind of going like, oh, well, she did die 3 years ago. I feel sad. This is, where am I feeling? Oh my, I might feel tight in my heart. I might feel, hot in my head. I might feel clenched in my gut. So really just try to get into your own experience of it, right? Without judgment, with curiosity and interest. Then kind of identify what the emotion is. Because here's the thing. Body sensations clue us in to the fact that we're having emotions and feelings. And if you can pay attention to those body cues, then you're going to be able to identify what your emotion is. So don't just say, and I don't like when people just say, I'm upset. I'm either fine or I'm upset. And sometimes for men it's fine or mad, and for women it's fine or sad. Culturally, we kind of say those things. But instead, really like, no, what is this feeling? Is it lonely? Is it grief? Is it sadness? Is it distraught? Is it melancholy, right? Is it just, is it annoyed? Is it enraged? Really kind of try to get in there with that feeling and notice your own verbal and nonverbal cues. What thoughts are going through my head? What am I saying to myself? Those would be my verbal cues. What are my actions saying? Both, like I said, if I'm hot or cold or sweaty or not sweaty, but also, am I like snapping at people? Are my behaviors saying something? No, I'm not mad, right? We've all had people do this, and I know the guys joke like, you hate me when you say, like, anything wrong? No, I'm fine. You're like, clearly you're not, right? So those are those kinds of things. And then finally, actually articulating that feeling and trying to sit with it and walk yourself through that feeling. So, these empathy skills can be applied to other people. And by applying them to other people, it reminds us to apply them to ourselves. And when we learn to apply them to ourselves, we then can apply them to each other. So 4 steps, a skill, it can be built, but it is not a skill that gets built in one repetition. This takes daily practice. So find places to empathize today. So I'm wondering if you guys are feeling a little tired of being locked down and a little tired of wearing masks and wondering when the routine is going to be normal there and you're going to get out of the pods more and go to classes and all those things. So I'll have to check out all what you went through when I get back and see you in person again. See you later.